I was thinking yesterday, remember in the last live stream, we talked about Silco's drowning in that blue scene, blue, because obviously it's water, the blue scene. And he was talking about, he just had the fight with Vander. And that kind of made him stronger. He'd been thrown in the water and he was drowning and he found the strength to kind of live. And he thanked old friend for that. And then there was this scene with Powder kind of falling out of the window. And she had made a decision at that time. And maybe while she was falling, that decision that she made will potentially in the long term make her stronger for it. Because she'll get through it, I imagine. Well, then I was thinking about this other scene in that episode where there was Jace and Victor together. Now, someone wrote in a comment, they said, oh, you'll get to see more of, and they combined the names and I can't remember what it was. Was it like J-Tor? Is that the right way? Do you remember when you had like Brangelina for Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie? They kind of did that with, I think it was J-Tor? Jace-Tor? Something like that. Anyway, there's this scene with Jace and Victor. And again, it's when they just put the stone into the machine. Oh, Javik, that's it, yeah. What was I saying? Jace, see, Brad and Angelina. Oh, that's right, isn't it? It's the first part of their first names joined together. That's right. I was trying to do like the first part and then a second part. That's why it didn't make any sense. Javik. That was right. There's that scene, isn't there, with Javik, and they've put the stone in the machine and it's doing all its arcane magic. And then it works. And Heimerdinger comes in. And it's all blue. The scene's all blue. And they're in the sky. And Heimerdinger says, can you please stop floating? And I thought, wow, that's like the opposite of the drowning of Silco and Powder. They're in the blue, a scene that looks very similar, but they're floating. And they're achieving something as well. So where Powder and Silco achieved something out of something negative, something bad, was synonymous with drowning, but pushed through it, Javik got stronger through something good happening. They're in a similar color scene, blue, but floating instead of drowning. And I was just thinking, is that on purpose? Have they done that on purpose? Because it sure makes sense that way. Oh, okay. Fair enough. Is there a record somewhere? I'm guessing that will be some kind of fan group or some kind of Reddit thing. But it's interesting that Heimerdinger uses the word floating. And I guess I don't know what else he could say really, because that's exactly what they're doing. They're not flying, they are floating. But I love that switch between floating and drowning with Silco earlier. He's like, the thing with drowning is Javik, like the thing with floating is. And actually both probably having a similar effect in terms of growth and strength. Oh, just check I've got an email from you see, I'm cross streaming this to Twitch because I opened a Twitch account. If you remember, I was telling you I had loads of problems with my name, my screen name. And I thought, long story short, Twitch is easier for content ID whilst you're live streaming. Because when I showed that footage the other day, although it got picked up on copyright, the risk is if I continued to live stream it, it would have ended the stream. It would have terminated the stream for me. Twitch are okay with that as long as you delete the live stream afterwards. So just for future me, thinking about music reactions, doing them live, I'm cross streaming this. I think I've not checked it. I don't know if it's working, but someone's just followed me on Twitch, so it must be. It's to see what the footage looks like afterwards, after I finish this live stream. I'd actually forgotten I'd set that up. But anyway, apologies. Just a bit of a side mission I'm doing here. Hi, Carol. That's all right. You're not that late. Carol, just to bring you up to speed, I was just talking about this interesting scene. We will get to Vander in a few minutes. The interesting scene about Silco's drowning at the beginning, all blue, drowning, made him stronger. Something negative had happened. He'd had his fight with Vander. At the end of that, or nearer the end of that episode, we had Powder thrown the bomb. Looked like she was falling out the building. It's all blue because of the kind of the blue sky and the blue scenery, the way the animation's done. She's kind of drowning, perhaps metaphorically. Again, she'd had a hard decision to make. And in the long term, it'll probably bring out some kind of strength in her. And then I was talking about JVIX, which is my new term, JVIX blue scene where they're floating. Heimerdinger says, "Oh, will you please stop floating?" Which is like the opposite to drowning, but the scene's very similar in terms of how it's animated, and that they're moving forward and gaining strength from their experience, but it was a nice floating experience as opposed to a drowning experience. So that's all you've kind of missed. Matt Sturgeon, the writers have been fairly vocal. There's a 2.5 hours. 2.5 hours a scene of series 1 behind the scenes content in Beyond the Rift, where the writers, animators, voice actors go into a lot of detail. And that's interesting. So end of season 1. So that's end of episode 9. So maybe I should check that out afterwards. That might give me some interesting insight to talk about their decision making, perhaps. Especially how their decision making kind of matches with my clinical experience and the evidence base. JVIC Nation. I like a bit of JVIC. They're like a bit of relief, aren't they, from everything that's going on? We also had Jace being floated, transported by the mage. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this kind of drowning, floating idea of where people are getting their kind of strength and drive from. Certainly, it's a nice metaphor. How do we feel about Vander's? Are you willing? Who are you willing to lose? Yeah, that's on the bridge, isn't it? That Vander's taking on too much of the decision himself, didn't I? Right. Park this. Park that. We'll come on to that now. This is a good point. I'm going to attempt to bring up what we did before. Excuse me. So, let me just bring this up. I'm going to be careful about screen sharing stuff because this is where I actually store a lot of my work. So this is the formulation that I did, that I put up on YouTube. No, I didn't. I put it up on the Patreon. I've not looked at it since. I've not touched it. This is just to remember kind of what I said and what I was talking about. Oh, that's a good point, Matt. I was taking it to mean the on the bridge when he's talking to Vi, but I think he did say something around something similar at the last drop when the crowd was saying, "You just want to protect your children," and he says, "I'm trying to protect all of you." Something similar. So let me get rid of all these arrows. Gosh knows what I was talking about when I was drawing all these out. Hopefully. There's still a part of me that does hope that Vander's actually going to come back. Because, firstly, that's the kind of stuff that tends to happen in these programs. And secondly, they've got magic. And Jace's mum did okay. I don't know if Jace's mum was actually dead, though. Or whether she was just very, very, very weak, and then the change in environment helped her. I'm not sure if she was actually dead. I'm not sure if we're told at any point or whether this is something I'm not supposed to know at this point. I'm not sure. Just waiting for the chat to catch up again, just so I don't miss anything and move forward too quickly. Probably going to aim to have this done by 9 o'clock, so we'll go for an hour today. I have waffled on for half an hour. I do apologise, I'm very chatty. Oh, James, I'm not sure if you're being really cryptic here. Very non-committal with that answer. Okay. I want to watch it so badly. I want to watch it all, but I want to enjoy. I want to understand it more, and I like this kind of stuff we're doing. I think Jace's mum just had frostbite on her fingers and was See, that's what I'm kind of thinking. I don't think she was actually dead. I think she was just very, very unwell and sick and weak and managed to pull through. I'm not sure if the magic can actually bring back the dead. I don't know. Because there was that point where I think when they first tested the blue stone, it kind of blew out the windows, but then it kind of reversed and the windows kind of sucked back into themselves. And I wasn't sure if that was it had some kind of repairing ability for something that can smash like the glass. I didn't know if it could also repair like life, but it could be it repairs sickness and someone who's on the brink of death, perhaps. I'm not sure yet. Can people see this okay? Because I do have another setup where I can have it, not like that. Like this. I don't know if this looks better for people because I can have this a little bit wider. This one or the first one? This is better. The first one. As soon as I asked the question, I knew that was going to happen. You can probably see more here. This is easier to read. Okay, that's what we want. We want it easy. I mean, I can zoom in and things as well, which I'm going to. I'm not just going to leave it zoomed out. Maybe I'll just myself up a bit, and then I can probably do a nicer overlay at some point. Okay. So we don't really know still about predisposing, because predisposing, we're really looking at the very, 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 very early years. So you're thinking about parenting styles, you're thinking about genetics, you're thinking about very early years up to, kind of 4, 5. We don't really know much about Vander up to that point, I don't think. I don't know if we get any more backstory about him later on, where it might make sense to populate that, but I don't think we know too much. And I don't know also if, for people that we don't know much about their backstory, whether kind of fans have made a backstory that people like and consider to be the backstory. So does anyone can think of anything that might go into predisposing? At the stage that I'm at, I can't really. We're going to guess. Maybe he was born into poverty. Some form of oppression, perhaps, from above. We're going to guess that the water was still polluted, maybe. We're going to guess that the air was still contaminated. This is going to be the same for anyone. So this isn't really specific to Vander, but it gives us a bit of insight. Let's see if anything's coming up in the chat. We know they had the fight on the bridge and the fight with Silco. Yeah, that wouldn't be predisposing. He'd be too old for that. Yeah, okay. Working in the mines, maybe as a child. Is that what those gauntlets he wears are actually for? Are they to do with some kind of mining? Some kind of mining instrument or equipment? Yeah, Matt, we'll come on to that in a minute. I think that's going to be more of a presenting problem. Yeah, okay, yeah. But then, the poverty and oppression and the working the mines also somewhat added to his protective factors because, it made him big and strong. Get rid of some of these marks I've made. Right. So I think this presenting problem isn't really a presenting problem. I think a better presenting problem of what we're going to look at and think about is what would the question be? What to do about Piltover? Or what to do about Grayson? More Piltover, isn't it? What to do about the divide between Piltover and the underground? There's something along those lines. There's the societal divide is a presenting problem. There's the Grayson wanting a name, but I did that after episode 1 actually, and but that wasn't really an issue, was it? By the end of episode 3, well, by him or her. Yeah, class fight, class division, and inequality, absolutely. That would also be predisposing. I went with kind of poverty and oppression to kind of suggest that, but that's also a presenting problem because do we think Vander sees it as a problem that needs to be fixed in a different way than he was trying to attempt to do it? Because I wonder if in his mind he'd kind of fixed it already with his deal with Grayson as much as he thought he could do. Obviously not in a perfect way. Yeah, he's given up, hasn't he? Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's not so much he thought he had done as much as he can and fix it. He just had given up. There's just nothing else he thought he could do. Thanks, Kudo. I'm looking forward to it, man. Looking forward to it. I've got so much to give, I think, to this, which is what I'm really looking forward to. So we'll put that as a presenting problem. This kind of lack of hope, maybe a feeling of hopelessness about the whole situation. James says, I wonder if in his mind he sees the issue being maintaining what he's built. Maybe he thinks he's solved the problem as much as possible. Yeah. I mean, that's will that look better over there? That's interesting, isn't it? I wonder if in his mind, maybe he thinks he's solved it as much as possible. And then he's got some of the younger crowd in terms of the kids saying, you should be doing more, Vander, you should be doing this, you should be fighting. And Vander's like, I've been there, I've done that, it doesn't work. This is the way that seems to be working for the best for everyone. But it's not just the kids are doing it, everyone's kind of hitting their tolerance level, aren't they, for what Piltover are doing, and the enforcers. All the people in the bar are kind of wanting to fight. This is before you get into Silco and his crowd as well. So not only does he hate the class divide that's still going on, but he is also, there's a bit of what's the word, like an uprising from everyone kind of against him. So the Piltover and the class divide are against him, the enforcers are against him, and his own people are really against him, and even his kids are kind of beginning to turn against him. Yeah, Legionnaires. That's a good way to put it, actually. Prioritizing stability. I'm going to put that as perpetuating, actually, because I think that's what actually keeps him stuck, is prioritizing stability. I like the way you phrased that. I think that's really nice. Because stability often brings with it compromise, doesn't it? And he seems to have hit the compromise point that he was willing to give. Do we? So that's what Legionnaire said for people who can't see it in the chat. I think that's a really nice point. the fact that the kids are still working with the same predisposition that he had shows he didn't fix the problem. Yeah, exactly right. So it's that it's almost like that idea of transgenerational trauma, isn't it? It's nothing's actually changed. It's just being passed down to the kids from one generation to the next. And probably to some degree that's in terms of the wider culture and society that they're growing up in, but who knows genetically what's happening with all of that water pollution, the air pollution going on in terms of what that is actually physically doing as children are born. James says, so I know that's white writing there on a white background, but he says, do we think the fact that he has a reputation and status in this current configuration of peace carries any weight in his decision to maintain the status quo? Do we think the fact that he has a reputation and status carries any weight in his decision? I don't know. I don't get the sense that he does. I get the sense that he's just worn out. Because he says something like, when he's having that chat with Silco, he says, like, I'm just not that man anymore. And I wonder if these are referring to something similar to that, James, or he just means I'm just not that man who kind of cares about being the hound of the underground anymore. I just don't want that anymore. Yeah, I agree, Carol. I think that was the best he could do. And for a time, maybe it worked for a little while. But then obviously we had this situation with the building being blown up that kind of changed then that status quo. Yeah, I've just read your comment, Matt. Yeah, it's exactly what I'm saying. Would you call Vander's perspective learned helplessness? I guess so, because because he's very limited, isn't he, in what he can actually do. And he looks tired of it. He looks absolutely like he doesn't have any other. Oh, so I've just loaded something then. I just misclicked. And I've loaded Notion. Just quit that. You can't see it where you are, don't I? I don't know if there's I don't think there isn't like a clinical definition of learned helplessness. Let's just see what definitions comes up, just to see if there's any more detail. So a mental state where a person or animal learns to accept and endure an unpleasant event, even when it's avoidable. So that's a bit of a caveat, isn't it? Even when it's avoidable. Is Vander's situation avoidable? If the question would be, if he were to take action, or is there any action that he could take to get out of it? And there is, I guess, he could fight. So then the question is, mental state where a person learns to accept and endure, even when it's avoidable. Guess the question is then, is it avoidable? What do you think, Pauline? What's your take on this? It then does go on to say, learned helplessness can lead to increased feelings of stress and depression. And for some people, it could be linked to PTSD. So we kind of see that in Vander, don't we? We see those feelings of kind of low mood, helplessness, hopelessness. Yeah, last thing he does it. There's so many scenes where he does just look defeated. And I guess this question, when we think about this definition of learned helplessness, a mental state where a person learns to accept and enjoy an unpleasant event, even when it's avoidable, it gets even more complicated because it comes down to whether he thinks it's avoidable or not whether we can see there's a way out of it that could perhaps bring him out of this situation. It's not what we can see, it's what sense he makes of that situation. So maybe he generally does think that he can't avoid it. But then if he can't avoid it, according to his definition, it's not learned helplessness. If he can avoid it, which we think he probably can, and there's got to be a part of him that thinks he can fight. He just doesn't want to protect the kids. Then I think it would be learned helplessness. It might sound like I'm being really pedantic here, but I think this is the stuff I like, kind of getting into the detail of definitions and what it means and trying to see it from the different perspectives. you know, if I was to write a court report or stand up and give evidence in court, which I sometimes have to do, this is a kind of thing I'd be thinking about to really make sure what I was saying was accurate. So Pauline says, yeah, I think it's avoidable. He just thinks the price to pay is too high, and so accepts worse. Yeah, if that's the case, learned helplessness. I'd agree. And I think James is right. I think we are converging on this idea, actually, that he does believe it's avoidable, but he's prioritizing not losing anyone. We see this, I can't give up my... Yep, I agree. Silco offers him an alternative, and he does end up rejecting it. So Silco does give him a way out, doesn't he? On that... they're not on a bridge. They're kind of on a bridge, but it's not the bridge scene. Where he's referring to each other as brother. And he does give him a way out, but he decides not to take it because he doesn't want to be that man anymore. Is that a result of the learned helplessness? Is that a result of the feelings of depression and hopelessness that comes with it? Yeah, so some really good points here. So Carol says, if it is avoidable, is it coming back to his trauma? Yeah, probably. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what he's been through. I don't know if more information comes out, but that scene on the bridge, he's clearly fighting with some enforcers that he would have seen everyone dying around him. That would have been that phrase he used earlier, potentially traumatic experience. I'm kind of guessing it probably would have been, but we'd call it a potentially traumatic experience. Yeah. And then we don't know what trauma he has from his parenting, what happened to his parents, and how he was treated, and whether he can see that pattern reoccurring again in Vi and Powder. It's a lot to think about. Really difficult when you don't have that much information and you don't have access to the person to sit them down and work through all of this stuff with them. Yeah, so I mean, we could potentially dig into that a bit further, couldn't we? We could ask, and it might, on the surface of it, seem common sense, but it might not be. The thought of losing his kids or his people pulls him back, but why? Why? What's the function of that? What's wrong with him losing his kids? Like, does he think, is there an element of kind of unjustness and unfairness with that because he wants to protect them? Does it question his ability to protect people? And maybe he hasn't been able to protect people in the past and he doesn't want to go through that again. So he doesn't want to lose the kids. Is it purely selfish because he knows that losing the kids is going to cause him pain and he doesn't want to go through that? He doesn't think he can again. There's a few kind of functions. It could be a blend of all of them. There's a few reasons or potential reasons why he might not want to lose the kids. I mean, it sounds like one of those questions, doesn't it? Well, of course, who would want to lose kids? Well, probably no one, but the reasons for which can be very different. Yeah, I think you bring up a good point, James, there. Kind of you could probably just call this whole situation kind of loss. It's kind of loss of everything, isn't it? It's loss of, I mean, I don't know if Piltover in the Underground are always like that. I don't know if he's heard stories where perhaps it wasn't as divided. So there's a sense of loss there. There's a sense of loss then in the class divide. There's a sense of loss, like you say, with Silco. There's a sense of maybe impending loss of his kids, or we can already see the path that the kids are going on. There's a lot of loss, and never mind kind of close connections he might have lost during that fight on the bridge scene. I still don't really know what that fight was about in a lot of detail. Yeah, what do you think about that, Carol? Silco doesn't care if some people would die. That's his solution. I mean, that question really comes down to And this is kind of the biggie, isn't it? This what you're saying there, Carol, is really the big difference between action and inaction. So in Vander, when I first started watching it, I was like, Vander's such a nice guy. He's looking out for these kids. He's got these values that really connect with my own personal values. So I connect with Vander really well. He's looking out for them. He's sacrificing kind of people calling him weak, but he's kind of taking that. He's sacrificing a bit of his own self-identity or how he's perceived by others in order to look after these kids. And I quite like that. That's quite nice. And then as the episodes go on, you kind of think, Vander, you got to do something, man. Like it's quite clear that the path that this is leading on with the enforcers, kind of getting into people's faces more, looking for the kids, and kind of the uprising in the bar and people saying we've got to do something. You've got to do something. And then on the action side, we've got what Silco is doing. I guess we have the liberty here that we've seen what happens with Vander's plan playing out. Is that, it didn't work. Whereas Silco brings with it some losses. But maybe ultimately, in the longer term, it's more likely to work for everyone. So actually, let's think about this. So let's think about Vander's values. What do we think Vander's values are? I think we touched on some of these down here before. I mean, he's caring towards, we'll just put kids because that will include Clagger and Milo and Vi and Powder and everyone. He's somewhat kind of caring about the overall community, I think. Caring of the community. I don't know if caring's really the right word there. Maybe it's more to do with responsibility. And then we've got Silco's values. What would we say Silco's values are? Value justice, yeah. Does he value justice? What evidence have we got that he values justice? It's right, I can see all your ideas coming through. They're good. Oh, cordiality. What does that mean? Coming out with the big words. They make me look stuff up. The quality of being pleasant and friendly. He's sticking up for Huck in the bar. Oh. Is that justice? Is justice meaning that he doesn't like to see people pushed over? But then on a bigger scale, so he'll stick up for Huck when he knows he's going to win, when he knows he's intimidating enough to win, but he won't do it when he's not sure if he's going to win, perhaps. Yeah, I think people are kind of saying, we're not sure if this is justice. He might have the value of justice. We don't know. I guess we wouldn't know without speaking to him. we can only, because we don't really know what goes on inside Vander's head, all we can really base this on is what we actually see. So his actual actions and behaviors. And this can get really difficult because you can have this disconnect between what you actually value and what you actually do. But actually, that could lead towards this clashing that leads to learned helplessness. That he values all this stuff, but he can't actually take action on it. And that's a really difficult place to be in. Yeah, so last thing it says, I think Silco and Vander can have some values that overlap. Absolutely. I agree. I think they are probably pretty much the same. I think these, in their own way, are the same. Maybe not caring towards specific kids from my perspective of all I've seen, but in terms of for the benefit of everyone, potentially. Yeah, so I think Pauline is saying what I'm trying to say, that Vander values survival of individual people to the detriment of a better future of Zorn, whereas I think Silco sees it wider than that and is willing to accept losses, but to improve things for later generations. So I think the value systems are very similar. They're certainly more similar than they are different. The difference that we see is the action. There's this interesting idea with values, which I'll share with you. And I'm trying to think of a metaphor. I think there's one around a pen. But the problem with values, so say you give yourself a value of, I'm going to look after these kids. I'm going to make sure these kids don't get hurt. Something like that. If you hold, so there's this phrase, hold on to values lightly, but pursue them vigorously. And if you saw my 10 rules to confidence video on my other channel, I talk a little bit about it there. Now, hold on to your values lightly, but pursue them vigorously. And the idea is that if you have really rigid values, such as I'm not going to let any harm come to these kids, no matter what, and you hold that tightly, so not lightly, then it makes your actions and your behavior very rigid and inflexible. So imagine values is this pen. Okay, and this pen is, I don't want, no matter what, I'm not going to let anything happen to these kids. Think about how easy it is to use this pen when I hold it lightly. I can do a lot with it. I can sign contracts. I can sign checks. I can write things. I can write messages to people. The pen kind of functions as my value, how I want it to be when I hold it lightly. If I hold this pen rigidly, like this, really hard. It's really hard to write anything when you're really squeezing your pen. It's not flexible. When you hold on to something too tightly, it becomes rigid, it becomes difficult. What you can do with it and your kind of behavioral repertoire with that, I guess, becomes narrower and it causes you problems. When you hold on to what's important to you more lightly, then you kind of free yourself up a bit and you can make wider decisions in how to act on that. And I perhaps think this comes into play with Vander's downfall on holding those values of caring for those specific individual people really tightly. It led him to inaction because any action he could have taken would have compromised the I must not let anything happen to these kids. What are people's thoughts on that? I'll count to 9 because that's how long the lag is. And then I'll wait for the comments. Thank you, James. I do have my moments. Let's pin that so everyone can see. And this isn't just something with Vander. This is something that, I see all the time in my practice. People holding on to these values so rigidly actually causes them more problems. And then they get confused. They're like, why is this causing me a problem? I'm sticking to my value. Because your behavior around it is so inflexible, you're causing yourself more problems. Yeah, exactly. And that's a terrifying position to be in, isn't it? Because by him being so rigid and staying true to his value, he's actually done the one thing that he was trying to avoid. That's right, 1 mile. I don't think he really thought it through, did he? He didn't kind of broadcast himself into the future to see how he thought this would play out. Because he was so gripped on, I've got to keep this kid safe. This is where we hear, I mean, people probably heard of this stuff before from, I think it was Albert Ellis or someone along those lines came up with this idea of, avoiding words like musts and shoulds and haves. I have to do this because at least if you really play by those rules, if you really set those rules for yourself, I must not let anything bad happen to these kids, then you really, really narrow down what you can actually do. I think most people who have read anything about therapy have come across these concepts. I think Albert Ellis actually called it, be careful how I say this, masturbation. Said no masturbation, no musts. People do it all the time. Yeah, James, that's a good question. I think you have to kind of you have to take a step back and reflect on the bigger picture of what's going on your life right now. It's like I could hold on to the value that I want to about learning and education and completing my doctorate. Like I could stay up for nights and nights and nights and nights doing that with the I must do this, I must complete that. That's no good for my health. I need to have breaks. I need to kind of split it up. I need to think of the longer term plan. And then I need to assess kind of how that value is working out for me. And I need to assess how I'm doing, like emotionally, internally, how I'm doing kind of physically, health, my physical health, and the impact that what I'm doing is having on my family and things. And there's this other idea. Oh, this is going to be embarrassing. So I want to go up and get something, but I've got, oh, that's all right. I'm wearing these really ridiculous, really thick jogging bottoms because they're fleece lined. It's absolutely freezing in this room. And for some reason, I thought my mind presented me some information that said, don't let people see them. Get judged. Get judged for your joggers. Sitting in your own house in the freezing cold. But I want to get this quickly. It's a globe. And the thing with values are, we've got loads and loads of values. So we might have values about, let's say I've got 2 values. Let's say I've got a value about caring for my kids, looking after for my kids. And I've got a value about learning and kind of improving myself academically. Well, these values could be on this globe. Again. But I can't see the whole globe all the time. So I might have, so right now, for instance, I am acting on my value, which I can see in the North Atlantic Ocean, which is sharing information, teaching others, which is what we're doing now. I am now actively working on this value. I also have a value about caring for my kids, but they're in bed now. That value is still there. It's just on the other side of the globe. I can't see it. I'm not concentrating on it right now. It has barely any direction on my behavior and my action right now, but that value hasn't gone. It's still there. It's on the other side of the globe. I just can't see it. Now, tomorrow morning when my kids get up and I need to sort them out for the day, the globe's going to spin. And I'm now going to see China, which is my value for looking after my kids. And that's what I'm going to focus on in that moment. Now, my value for learning or sharing information hasn't gone anywhere. It's just on the back. And I can flexibly shift between these 2 values when needed. This is kind of flexibility in values. Now, what would happen if my kids get up in the morning and they need help getting ready, but I'm focused on the value of learning? They'll be talking to me. They could be saying they've had a poor night's sleep. And all I'm thinking about is, oh, what's the next video I'm going to make? Oh, when am I going to watch the next Arcane? I'm not engaging with my kids at that point. I have a very inflexible kind of sense of my values at that time. And it takes me away from the value of being with my kids. Whereas if I'm sat here now talking to you, and all I can think about is, oh, my kids sleep all right. I hope they don't have a bad night. Then it's going to take me away from the present moment with you guys. So values can get really complicated, really difficult. It can be quite hard to balance. I don't know, does that make sense? So actually, what I get a lot of people sometimes who come to me in practice and say that having values conflicts, like their values are kind of, they don't fit well together and it's causing them problems. And actually, quite often I find it's not actually a values conflict, it's a time conflict. They're trying to do all of their values at the same time. So the values clashing isn't a problem. The problem is the time management of those values. Actually, the skills they need to do are more around present moment awareness type training and kind of bringing yourself back into the now, what's important now, and understanding that there'll be times later for actions on other values. It becomes more of a present moment awareness, time management type intervention, as opposed to like a values sort intervention. Yeah, it's an interesting point. What do you think Vander's actions would look like if he used the time management line of thinking? Because outside of looking after the kids, what else is he really doing? Running his bar, striking deals with Grayson. Like we don't see much of him, I don't think, in the series outside of his presenting problems. I mean, I guess it'd be pretty boring if we just saw him just chilling, having a beer. There's one scene, isn't there, where he's putting the drink for Powder, but again, it feels like that's more connecting with Powder than it is, doing something for him, although he is getting something out of it. Yeah, selling things to Benzo. So I guess there's all of that, isn't there? There's all of that side of things. But I don't think there's probably nothing that would actually solve this wider systemic problem. But he somehow ended up in this situation where he finds it his responsibility. I mean, I hate some of the social divide that we have in this country. I think, especially in terms of wealth equality, which then leads to other things like health inequality. But I don't take it as my responsibility to try to sort that out. I do my bit. So I have a value around that, and I do my bit in terms of educating people. I work with very, very kind of poor families, and I do my part for them. But I'm okay with that. I don't feel like I have the responsibility to do much more. If I did take on that responsibility and I wasn't happy with what I was doing now, then that could lead me into a lot of trouble, I think. But also it could lead me into a learned helplessness type situation, because the reality is that I would make very little change. I don't know, that's different to Vander's situation. And he's got this high reputation of the Hound of the Underground following him. But I think there are limits that you have to set yourself in terms of your responsibility for things. That's my kind of personal thoughts on that. Vander's avoidant of his problems and prefers not to take any action that creates conflict. Do you think it's about creating conflict, or do you think it's about keeping Vi and Powder safe and the others? Is that the overruling value? Avoiding conflict will keep them safe, but is the point of avoiding conflict is to keep them safe? So the overriding value is keeping them safe. Yeah, 1 mile. He's not going to find that, is he? Like, that's never going to happen. And you wait and you wait and you wait. And actually, the one thing that he didn't want to happen happens. And we see this all the time, don't we? Where there's no good solution. The solution doesn't exist. Like, life isn't black and white like that. It's grey and murky. And I'm going to say something profound then about Silco drowning and making the decision to take action or not, to not take action and die, or to take action and do something and in his mind become stronger because of it. But at the end of the day, that's taking action, which he did. Yeah. And I think when I did my reaction to, I can't remember which episode it was, where there's, I think the two, where there's a bit of an uprising in the bar and they say it makes you look weak. And I was like, no, it doesn't make him look weak. It sounds like he's trying to balance a very difficult situation here. And that's the decision he's come to. If I look back at that now, knowing what I did about him, I'd agree. I'd say it does actually make him look weak. Weak as a leader. Vander could have given the lanes a real alternative to Silco. He had a community building skill. He pinned everything to himself. Exactly. He took all that responsibility himself because he didn't want to place it on anyone else. He could have shared that, I guess. Yeah, Pauline. Oh, well, that's right, isn't it? And what usually happens in those situations, everyone just gets frustrated. Nothing really resolves itself, does it? It just kind of, everything just kind of sails along as it always has, with everyone getting frustrated and no one really happy with the situation. And in my experience, eventually something happens. There's either a big change in the family where someone moves away or something and it settles things, or there's just a massive conflict and it gets worse. Brings us back to a point made, touched on earlier by Legionnaires, about Vander thwarting people's agency, but allowing others to take action, be the right balance. I mean, I wonder why, I mean, now you say that, I wonder why they didn't just take action without Vander. Why were they so reliant on Vander being part of this? They felt he was so weak. Why not just take action without him? Well, I was going to load my email up there quickly to see if anyone else had joined me on Twitch, but then you'll all get to see it. I forgot you were sharing. Oh dear, James, am I going to ruffle some feathers with that perspective? I mean, I get Vander's perspective completely. I can understand it. And that's what this is all about, is just trying to understand it a bit more and kind of understood what the consequences of that was. If I was in Vander's position, I could see me going down the same route. I really could. Yeah, I guess you're right, Legionnaires. Kind of Silco was kind of building that, wasn't he? He was building the people, the little kind of army, I guess, of people who wanted to take action. And I guess Vander still probably did have people who were following him. Yeah, and that's what, and I guess, James, that's what kind of you're picking up on what Legionnaire said there. But me think about your last comment about the Vander stands coming after me is that it's right. It's like Vander's not perfect. No one is perfect. Everyone's making what they perceive as the best decision in line with what they believe in and their value structures. It's about understanding those different perspectives and the interplay of that. Because when it's just one person, it kind of makes sense. But when the consequences of your actions then start having impact on other people's value systems, it starts to get very messy very quickly. Because the reality is, no one is thinking about each other's perspectives in this. People just think you've probably heard all of this before. You know, everyone thinks they're the main character in the world, in life, and everyone else is just kind of, you know, side characters. And half the people are NPCs. You know, we think it's like the spotlight effect. I think it's all about us. And I think it's rare that we actually take the time to think about other people and then the interplay between that and you. Yeah, Marina, that's I hope I said that right. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It's you kind of have that effect, don't you, where we do it this way because that's how we've always done it. We listen to Vander because we've always listened to Vander. But there's no kind of attempt to change there at any point. Yeah, so Savika was I didn't pick up on this until afterwards actually when I was doing the edit that she had kind of switched sides. She had gone from Vander to Silco. Oh, that's interesting because actually it means that she must have she either knew Silco from before and knew what he was up to in his plans, or he was just really easy to seek out for her. Like that's how many people were defecting away from Vander. It was just so easy to find Silco. But she switched, didn't she? Probably in line with her value structure is like, this is the action that we need to take. This group seem like they're going to be doing it. I'm heading that way. But she certainly put her feelings about Vander, if she had any positive feelings towards him, aside pretty quickly. There wasn't much compassion, was there? I don't think. Not much compassion given. Yeah, I imagine so, Sarah. I think we picked up on this a bit earlier. That he probably is scared of history repeating because there's something. So this value and this rule of I must keep the kids safe, that's come from somewhere. Like that didn't exist in Vander forever. He wasn't born with that. Something has happened because this starts getting really difficult because actually there's a lot of psychologists out there who believe that values aren't even a thing that exists. Okay, all values are our learned history with reinforcing consequences being applied over and over and over and over again that then become the things that we seek just through reinforcement. Which is a very kind of clinical way to look at life, I think. But it's a valid perspective, I think. It's when you start getting to the argument of free will, does free will exist, and those kind of questions. But that rule for Vander, bringing it back to him, has come from somewhere. He's lost someone at some point and said, I'm not going through that again. This is now going to be my rule. The action versus inaction parallels all over the show. I can imagine. I can imagine. And just as a guess, it's these kind of dilemmas are normally presented in such a way that the action on the face of it looks like a decision that's going to hurt people and cause pain to people, whereas the inaction doesn't. But the inaction usually doesn't lead to anything and actually makes things worse longer term. That's usually how these type of things are presented. I'm not sure how it's going to present here yet. Yeah, that's what I figured. The Silco can't have been that underground. He must have been easily found, relatively easily found. Right, I'm getting a little conscious of the time. It's 9:30. We're going for an hour and a half. So let's just think about summarizing this a bit. So I think, bring this up. Tell you what's weird with the iPad. When you plug it into the MacBook, it always defaults to 9:41 on the 9th of Jan, no matter what time or date it is. Like you see it at the top. Really weird. So we did as 5Ps originally. Not much of that has actually changed. But what was interesting with the 5Ps was taking his kind of perpetuating factors, the things that keep him stuck is actually, I think we decided his value system. It's his value system, really interestingly, kept him stuck. And it kept him stuck in this inaction. Because we use the metaphor of the pen, the pencil. That the inaction, he was holding that value system so tightly that it just led to inaction to try to keep people safe, but ultimately was his demise. And at the time, when I wrote this formulation, we had all these protective factors. And I guess, and he kind of lost, he lost Benzo. He lost his reputation, really. That had gone. That was clear from the bar scene. And some of the protective factors, like learn from past experiences and adapt behavior accordingly, he kind of really didn't, did he, in the end? He used his past experiences to not do anything, more inaction. Well liked by the local community. That's kind of going. Vine Powder was still around, but there was some conflict there around his inaction. His ability to self-regulate, yeah, maybe, but he was getting a bit. He just looked tired all the time, didn't he, and beaten. And the ability to perspective take and mentalize wasn't particularly helpful. Big and strong and healthy. But again, he just looked physically, he's big and strong, but mentally and emotionally, he just looked beaten towards the end. So actually, he had very few protective factors that were going to help him. So when you break all of this down, what we know about him, it was almost, now you know this, it was almost inevitable what was going to happen, I think. Something like this was always going to happen to him. And sadly, the Hound of the Underground is no more. We heard on the show the literal heartbeat stopping, as I pointed out, which has also made me think about watching the rest of the show in my decent headphones and my Sennheisers, because actually, so many little details there that I want to start listening out for. Let's see what people have been saying about what I've just been saying. I'm curious if we think the underlying feeling of helplessness is a cause for him deflating. Yeah, that's interesting, because I think I picked up on that. I think I say something like, he's either going to go completely flat here or he's going to go absolutely nuts. And I was hoping he was going to go nuts and start pile driving people into the ground. But that didn't happen. He's just, I think it was just like the last straw, isn't it? The straw that broke the Hound of the Underground's back. I think it was just seeing that. He was such a big protective factor, and just seeing that whipped away in front of his eyes in such a horrific way. It just flatlined him. He just went into almost a freeze response instead of a fight or flight. And I think that just demonstrates the loss of fight in him, that he's not the man that he used to be. The man that he used to be probably would have got up and kicked some ass, but I think that just shows he was just done for. You look healthier in the other camera. In this one, it's because it's so warm. I look really red in this though. It's just because this is a proper camera. But I do look very red. And now I can take. Oh, too much. Okay, maybe I'm not as red there. Now I look a bit like a ghoul. I look a bit like. I'm reading this book at the moment called Dial D for Dead Man. Probably sounds a bit childish, but it's part of this series by his name's Barry Hutchinson or something like that, and it's part of this series called Space Team. Oh, it sounds so geeky when I say it, but there's this spin-off of it. This dead ghoul called Dan Deadman, who's like a detective. Stay on this for a bit because I want to see how it looks on the stream afterwards. Sometimes this gets really massively compressed more than the webcam and it looks really bad. Too little, too late. I hope you're not referring to my choice in webcam here, but more towards kind of Vander, perhaps. Do we want Street to react to music? I think so. I want to react to music. I might stick up a poll for the few tracks that I've got a choice of. Yes, Pauline, exactly. He was clinging onto that value to protect the kids so inflexibly. That was the only thing that got him to. Oh, that was the only thing that got him to switch into fight mode. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, maybe it was just. Yeah. Yeah, so like just the last ditch attempt at trying to do that. Predictions for next act. Silco takes Powder, turns her into some kind of machine, not like a physical machine, like a, like a soldier, but but I don't mean in an exploited way. I mean in a generally caring for her way, but makes her strong. And then there was a bit when I was editing the video to go on YouTube, there was a bit where Vi said she gave Powder something and said, light this. If you get lost or if you can't find me or whatever, light this and I'll come and find you. So that's still out there, I think. So maybe there's something with that will happen. Vi's obviously been taken by the Enforcer. I don't know. Vander gone, what? Is this where we see like Silco and what he brings to play in terms of Piltover? I mean, I don't know if there's any other players about. Benzo's gone, Vander's gone. There's only really Silco about. I guess you've got Vi, but Vi and the Enforcer, so maybe Vi is going to start working with the Enforcers, similar to how Vander had to deal with Grayson, maybe. I mean, there's got to be some resistance to Silco. And where's that going to come from? The Enforcers. Will there be any resistance from the underground itself? I don't know if I know enough characters for there to be. They're either dead or they're with Silco. Time flies when you're having fun. Sarah, after series 1, are you going to series 2? Yeah, I'm going to go in series 2. I'm going to get it done, I think. Yeah. Oh, I remember why I didn't use this camera that often now, because it doesn't. So when my Sony is connected to my cam link, I'll use autofocus. And look, it's focused on my mic. I move my mic out the way. It's a learning curve. It's a learning experience for me, this. Do I have any predictions for Echo? No, not yet. I don't know. No, it did, James. And with that, I am going to leave it there, I think. I've had a very enjoyable couple of hours. This has been fun. How many people have we had on? We've had 301 comments. That's good. That's a good engagement. 16 current viewers, 79 views in total. So 79 people have popped in. The average view duration, 30 minutes 45. Looks okay to me. Thank you, 1 Mile. I really appreciate the feedback. I am going to leave it there. No problem. No problem at all for everyone who's saying thank you. Quality is amazing. Thank you. Thanks for a fun time. Thank you guys. I mean, like it is. We all make this the thing that it is. We're all engaged in this. We're all sharing ideas, which is how I always imagined this would be. This is more fun than me just updating formulations just off what I think at the time and videoing it. So have a good evening, everyone, or good late afternoon. If you're in that time zone. That's it. Take care. Good night.